Thank you for coming for this session. This session has a very deep resonance with me personally because over the last almost 3 decades, I've spent in the arts and culture sector. Very privileged to know that the arts and culture is what we look towards, to grieve, to celebrate, to be inspired, to be encouraged, to feel belonging, but also been very aware, very aware of its power to influence, to manipulate, to hypnotize, and the powers that be everywhere uses the arts and culture to shift, shape narratives, erase, and construct, reconstruct, manufacture those stories that are convenient and complementary to the powers that be. So when I looked at this book first, I was curious, and that curious soon while reading bordered on disbelief, and from disbelief, disturbance was not very far away. And I left the book at the end with a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear at what is to come. So normally at a session like this, I would begin with saying, I'm delighted to be here, but I'm not. With a lot of trepidation, actually, I enter this session with Namit and Kunal. And my first question is to Kunal. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of this book. And the reason I ask this is we have seen the current dispensation of power be there since 2014. It's 10 years, and yet nobody has really looked into this. This has been going on for so long. And this is the first book on this kind of popular culture and politics coming together within a certain context. So tell us a little bit how it all started.
Just very flattering introduction, saying that it scares and it disturbs you, but unfortunately, that is a marker of the times that we're living in. The book really came about, Aru, when I was out reporting on hate crimes, and I've been doing that, for about 4 or 5 years now. I've started reporting on hate crimes since the 2018. And then, we have here Samar Halankar, who used to run a hate crime database tracker for the website India Spend. And in fact, Samar was the one who sort of also got me on the job to go out, to travel, to try and understand why this is happening. Why is our society, the social fabric of our society, really rupturing in so many places? It used to always puzzle me, to be honest, Aru. I have gone to villages where there were brothers, there were neighbors, there were friends who had grown up together, who had, spent all of their lives together, who had shared meals. They used to be, in each other's homes at all times. And yet something happens, and they end up either killing each other or driving each other out of their village, assaulting each other, accusing each other of, storing beef in your fridge, for instance, slaughtering a cow. And of course, we did a bunch of stories looking at all of these individual instances. And yet, the larger question would always trouble me. And my question used to always be, what changed? Right? What changed for these friends, for these neighbors to stop being neighbors and friends? And the answer to that came about in 2019 when I went to Jharkhand. And for those of you who've read the book, you know this part already. I was there to investigate another hate crime that had happened, and this was a small town called Gumla in Jharkhand. Now, it was Ram Navami when this happened, and Gumla has always had a very syncretic tradition where whenever the Ram Navami procession passes through the main mosque, which is the Jama Masjid of Gumla, the local Muslims would come out. They would offer refreshments to the Hindu processionists. They would garland some of them. They would give them food, water, drinks, and like every year, the year that the incident happened, which was actually 2 years before I found my way there. That particular year, there was, again, like always, the Ram Navami procession was slowly making its way The Muslims were waiting outside the mosque. And suddenly, as soon as the procession enters the lane, something changes in the procession, right? The energy changes, the behavior changes. They become a lot more aggressive. There is an energy that can't be described. And to a lot of the local Muslims, especially, as well as Hindus who I later spoke to, they said that was something that they'd never seen before, that kind of aggressiveness in the crowd. And on sort of repeatedly asking what had changed, one of the things that came to my attention when I was speaking to eyewitnesses, Aru, is that in that moment and that particular year, and it had not happened before, the procession had started playing this one particular song. The words of the song were to the effect, "Mulle ki topi gira do," right? Knock the skull cap off the cleric. And that is the song that they choose to play when they pass through the mosque. And suddenly all of the Muslims who are standing out, outside the mosque are aghast. I mean, they're outraged, some of them are angry. And an incident could have easily happened. We were at the brink of a riot in Gumla at that point. But the police quickly intervened. The police said, nothing doing, switch off the music, let the procession pass. We don't want any of this here. And that was the end of it, except that wasn't. Because that night, when some of these people in the procession were going back home, 3 kilometers away from the spot where this happened, some of these people, some of the processionists, found a Muslim boy talking to a Hindu girl. He was a 20-year-old Muslim boy. They decided to tie him up to an electric pole because they said he was doing love jihad, and then lynch him right then and there. And to come back to my original point, these people, the culprits in the case, knew the Muslim boy. They had acquaintance with him. They used to come to his father's shop in Gumla. So they knew each other, and yet in that moment they did what they did. And then sort of that was the incident that sort of really pushed me deeper into understanding what these songs were all about. I mean, I still remember that night that I first learned of this, and I write this in my book as well. I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to know more and more about the songs that was producing this violence. So that was really how the journey started. And from songs, I decided to sort of broaden my scope of the book, and I looked at music, not just music, but poetry, as well as books. So I've looked at 3 different pop culture formats and tried to understand how all of the 3 have been weaponized in the service of Hindutva. And that is really how, honestly, the book came about. It was really that curiosity born the night I learned about the lynching.
Thanks, Kunal. When I was going through the book, I realized Akar Patel has given a little comparison here with the writings of Victor Klempener, who wrote during the Nazi time, 1933 to 41. He painstakingly wrote a diary about everything that was happening every day. I had read part of that diary, and I remember when you say this power of words, that he writes, words can be like tiny doses of arsenic. They are swallowed unnoticed, appear to have no effect, and then, after a little time, the toxic reaction sets in after all. And that's exactly what you said. I'll come to Namit. Namit, you work in the world of words and performance. No one other than a stand-up comedian actually can be at that point where a single word, a phrase, presented and performed in a particular way can change the environment of the room, can change the energy of the room. How do you see this power of words influencing people to the extent that Kunal just pointed out?
See, the thing is that, it all boils down to the room that you're playing to. All right, like at times, if you're performing in Bangalore, where most of the people are educated, where most of the people are reasonably privileged, I honestly think I don't have that much of power, because they know the context, they know they know the backstory. So they will listen to me or anyone who's saying something, and they will use their own intellect to evaluate that. But that's not the case in smaller towns, the part of India where I come from, tier 3 cities in maybe even tier 2 cities. That over there, yes, words have a lot of power. Over there, people don't have, like, there's this something called an intellectual privilege, that I'll say, that, the kind of environment that you grow up in. And I have seen this happening. Like, if you come across a random individual in West Bengal, okay, usually an average individual in West Bengal would be more well-read than an average individual in Uttar Pradesh. That's just how it is. I'm not being racist here. That's just the reality. So, in UP, someone like... We can hear you. Okay. Yeah. In UP, someone like a... So, like in UP, when someone like a Zakir Khan says कि मैं सख्त लौंडा हूँ, and and I don't need a woman in my life, boys are actually like, ये हमारा भगवान है. Because वैसे भी life मुश्किल ही है. But in West Bengal and all, they are not like that, because they are aware of a very different body of work that precedes stand-up, that precedes Zakir, that precedes all of that. Right? So it's like, if I have to put, in 60s in West Bengal, a movie released called Charulata, right? And that movie was about feminism, and that movie was a commercial success. And that movie, even if I show it to my parents in UP today, they're like, kya hai yaar, ye kya boring hai ye? What is this? We don't want to watch this. So that is the core difference. So yeah, words have power, but they only have power vis-a-vis the gullibility of the audience you're playing to, is what I feel.
Actually, Namit, I wish you were true about West Bengal. Unfortunately, what we have seen, especially in small towns, villages, and even big cities in West Bengal, it's very, very quickly becoming what you think it is not. So thank you for saying it, but it used to be. It's like all the good things are in the past.
But I mean, I actually want to just sort of also point out, and since the time I started reporting, which was 2019, on this particular subject, the music that I talk about, the pop culture that I write about, was mostly consumed, as Namit said rightly, in rural, semi-rural parts of the country. I would struggle a lot to find evidence of that in cities, in bigger cities. My journey has led me to complete the book, whereas the journey of this pop culture is that it's now reached the cities as well. And I'll give you a short example of this. When India and Pakistan played each other at the cricket stadium, at the Narendra Modi cricket stadium, very fittingly, we had one of these songs play in the stadium, right? Bharat ka bacha bacha, Jai Shri Ram bolega. And there are numerous videos. If you go online, you'll find videos of this. I don't know if there is a correlation, but what we did see happen in that match is that a bunch of Indian fans heckled a Pakistani player and sort of heckled him with Jai Shri Ram. And which is exactly what the song is also asking them to. Similarly, in this particular year, I've also seen this Hindutva pop music being played in Mumbai, where I hail from, in Ganpati processions, in Navratri, massive, where people are, educated people are paying a couple of thousand rupees a night to go and perform and dance. Songs are also played there. So the journey of H-pop has gone from being something consumed in semi-rural and rural to now very firmly within the space that people here in this room occupy.
See, the main difference that I think that has happened is that earlier in bigger towns, in metropolises, bigotry was closeted. It was always there. It was just closeted. Now, with the recent change in the political scenario, that bigotry doesn't need to be closeted anymore, because now it has kind of become socially acceptable to be a bigot. So that's one thing that has
laudable,
changed.
not just accepted, almost laudable. Yeah, and that's unfortunate. Actually, what's very interesting in this book is Kunal talks about 3 different stories here. One to do with a singer, Kavi Singh. Another one, the second one, is about a poet, Kamal Agne. And the third one is Sandeep Deo, who's a publisher, a book person. But each of them have very different ways in which they become vehicles of this hate politics, so to say. Kavi Singh is very straightforward, seems like a very simple person who's like into what she's being sort of also made to sing by a certain family ecology that she comes from. So straight, blunt, upright, it's all out there. Kamal and this is, of course, this is what they seem to me. Kamal seems like this very sly and crafty person, full of great imagination for creating decoys in the kind of conversation he's creating in these Kavi Sammelans. Sandeep Deo seemed the most scary one to me because he seemed like somebody who's so committed, so loyal to the core of the ideology that he actually feels the current powers are not good enough, are not Hindu enough. So that's the other end. I want to ask you, Kunal, how did you see across the three? What's the differences in the kind of impact it has on, because that's our key thing, right? The impact these things are having on the audiences. What did you see there?
So I think at multiple levels they benefit the BJP and the larger Hindu right-wing ecosystem. At one level, it is simply about creating and setting narratives, right? Any incident that happens, these are some of the influencers who will come out with perspectives that you and I should have, or at least their target audiences should have. So, for instance, when Article 370 came out, we were still, it was obviously like most things with this government, it was still a shock for most of us. We didn't understand how it happened. It was announced overnight, all of that. And just then, within a day's time, Kavi Singh, who's the singer, comes out with a video and a song, of course, which talks about how Article 370 has finally, sort of lifted Kashmir out of slavery. And there is a line in the song which says, "Ab Kashmir Ghati mein Jai Shri Ram ke naare gunjenge," right? So quickly you've got a narrative there. So if you're unable to process what this decision is going to do, they're giving you a narrative saying this is what you must believe, right? So at a very simple level, it is about setting these narratives. At another level, it is also sometimes about offsetting some of the criticism that can come towards the government or the party. Right? So they're also constantly spinning things around. And I talk in my book about how, especially justifying, making you see things in a light they're not originally meant to be, just so that, you don't end up criticizing the government. So there's also that. There's a lot of spinning that happens. But I honestly believe, I think the most sort of insidious of all of this is that it allows the Hindu right wing overall to continue setting the agenda when it comes to Hindutva without any of the top rung of the leadership ever having to say a word, right? So the top rung can continue saying sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas, sabka prayas. I'm sure by 2024 we'll have a couple of other additions to it. But so that rung can continue saying all of this and continue coining slogans. Continue even wooing Pasmanda Muslims, for instance. But then there is this rung, which is doing its job. So it's constantly producing more and more and more content, which is ensuring that the anger and the fear that you feel towards its enemies is not just, it's not just fresh, but it's constantly reiterated, right? So it's a very convenient exercise. I mean, you're really stoking fear, anger, and hate without actually having to do this any of this yourself. So you can go to the US, you can go to the UK, you can have all of these, you can address the White House, you can address the House of Reps and all of that, and never actually be directly linked to the Hindutva agenda. But you have all of these players who are doing the job for you. So, I mean, what is more potent than that?
This is something that has always, and Namit, I'll come back to you now, because I have hardly met any stand-up comedian who doesn't have an FIR against them. So it seems like, as far as arts and artists are concerned, either you shut them down because they're criticizing you, or you make them sing your own tune. And outside of this, especially authoritarian governments, from communists to fascists, seem to have no other way of engaging artists. Either you speak for me or you don't speak. I want to understand from you, Namit, as an artist, how do you see the difference between critical art, which is as it should, criticize, comment on, investigate the current social space, political space that we live in, versus propaganda art, which is very clearly the mouthpiece of certain kinds of ideologies. And then art that creates specific hatred towards either certain kinds of people or beliefs or lifestyles. And we've seen that again across various governments, not just this one. So critical art, propaganda art, and art created to create hate. How do you see them differ, or do they have very similar origins?
Do you have an FIR already?
I have.
Oh.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, I'll tell you guys the truth about all these FIRs, okay? Most of these FIRs are basically done by some political leader trying to gain local clout. They just want to project themselves कि मैं धर्म का रक्षक हूँ. That is it. वरना एक FIR करने 200 लोग नहीं जाएंगे. वो FIR की कॉपी के साथ थाने में फोटो नहीं खिंचाएंगे. जिनकी भावनाएं आहट होती हैं उनको PR की पड़ी होती है. मतलब if their feelings were really hurt, they wouldn't have the time to come up with such systematic planning. But they're like, we cried after listening to your joke. I'm like, sir, no, you didn't. But the thing is that, see, a lot of times independent artists like me, we just, we have realized this, and I tell this to all the comics in the scene also, that unless you have a lot of parental money or something, just say sorry and move on. Because the Indian jurisdiction is such that it will drag on, it will drain your resources. It's not worth it. Just say sorry and move on and continue what you're doing, maybe in a subtle manner. And one day when you make it too big, then you can get back at everyone. That is the objective that all of us have right now. Now coming to this thing, propaganda art, it's not art. I'll be very blunt. Any art, see, art can have a motive, art can have a message, art cannot have an agenda. When art has an agenda, it's not art. It's just advertising. Like Kashmir Files, it's advertising. You can call it, oh, it's filmmaking. It's not. It's not. Let's just be honest. It's not. It's not filmmaking. It's actually bad filmmaking, if you ask me. I mean, I watch a lot of cinema, and it was horrible. Like, just if I look at it just as a movie, with the aspects of looking at it cinema, it's horrible cinema. But even if it was say, it fared well on technical aspects, I'll still not call it art because it has an agenda. So any art which is basically just trying to push through a political message or anything, no, it's not art. So, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much about it. Because see, the thing is, if you have it's basically like doctoring the script. It's basically telling your writer what to write, and that's not how storytelling works, right? A story has to take its own course. A story has to be pure. A story has to come from the heart. And you have already decided the climax. You're like, this is what's going to happen. We're going to make this side look good. No, man. That's just not right. Yeah.
Thanks, Amit. Kunal, I'll ask you the same question, but I will add another layer to it, because this question again keeps coming up in the book. There is a place where ideology, hate, and commerce come together. Is it just more commercially viable to sell hate today? And I'm not saying it is only that. I'm just saying it just makes the act much more lucrative than it is to only do it because of ideology. Is that the case? Because you've been in the field. And all your characters, all these three characters move through. And I'm reading, I'm thinking, ye to ideology, this is not because of ideology, something else is in play, some other ambition is in play. And that's also what we see with politics. And if you connect it, this whole achhe din for some and not for everyone else is so much about commerce as well. So what do you think? Where does this intersection of ideology, hate, and being commercially viable come in?
So I'll respond with an example, and this is an example again from the book. Kavi Singh, who's the singer in the book, she has her debut song, which is about Pulwama. Right? The Pulwama terror attack happens, and a couple of days later, Kavi Singh is out with a song, which is really sort of trying to portray the Kashmiri Muslims as the ones who were responsible for the attack. So, she's saying, don't look at Pakistan, don't blame Pakistan, don't blame the neighbors, don't blame terrorists. These are people who are living amongst us, who are to be blamed for the terror attack. So, if you have to do something, then attack them, then kill them off, right? And the song gains virality, it gives her incredible amount of success, she gets fame overnight. And after that, she starts doing these songs which are actually not very political. She does a song which is, a song about voter awareness, about how we should all be voting, about how we should all exercise our right and all of that. And then she goes on to do a song about the history of India, which is, maybe a couple of instances here and there of some politics, but not overtly political. And none of those songs give her the kind of success that Pulwama did. Right? So she's suddenly sitting there and wondering what's happening. I got all of this fame with one song, and now I'm trying to do these different kinds of songs, which are again very important subjects. But why is no one responding to me?
No takers for that.
No takers for that. So she starts going on this journey where she's doing all of these seemingly apolitical songs and doesn't find any takers. And then she says, wait a minute, this is not about my music. This is about my ideology, where ideology is going to get me commercial success. And that is the way for me to go ahead, both in terms of money, but in terms of fame, in terms of access. And then that is something that is recurring in this world. They wouldn't be doing this if it was not also commercially viable. The truth is, in today's India, hate sells. Hate sells incredibly well. And we've seen examples like Namit mentioned, the Kashmir files, the Kerala story. If I'm a filmmaker in Mumbai and I have some friends who are in the industry, and I remember after COVID, they were all struggling to figure out what to do. They didn't know what would work, what would not work. People are not going to theaters. And then come, these two movies, and they sell. People are flocking to the theaters. People are chanting Jai Shri Ram, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai. It's going to pack theaters. And if I was one of the filmmakers whose films didn't work or whose films bombed in that period, I'd be like, hang on, is this the formula that I must then adopt? It's a very fair question in India. And then the question is, do you then blame them? Because if our consumption is now increasingly towards that kind of content, our content is also increasingly then significantly turning towards that side. So it's really supply and demand in some ways, in very cynical ways.
Yeah, Namit, I'll come back to you with this, saying, but is it also self-feeding, like chicken and egg situation, right? Which came first? Because this is something that is also created by this content, and then that eats up more content like this.
You see, in case of movies like Kashmir Files and Kerala Stories and all, what's happening is that the Kashmir Files win, like, I think 1 or 2 national awards, if I'm not wrong. Right? Now, if you remember back in the day, national award was very objective. It didn't matter on how popular the movie was. It was actually very objective, that if it's a good movie, it's going to get a national award. We have had so many directors whose names Gen Z doesn't even know, Govind Helani and Shyam Benegal, and all winning national awards for movies that were not popular at all. Now what's happening is, by giving the national award, the government is actually giving validation to this, that this is good stuff. If you like it, there's nothing wrong with you. And that is also helping this propagate even further, because national award makes it seem like that everything that has been told in these movies is true. And people are like, bro, national award winning movie, come on. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still not a good movie.
I will come to narratives now. In 1909, UN Mukherjee had written in the publication Bengali, Hindus a dying race. So this, 1909, no? 1906, thanks. Thanks for correcting me, Mohan. So this narrative that our, the population is a problem, there is this anxiety created around demographics. This narrative has been there for many, many years. And over the last century, a lot of the other narratives that are being created by RSS and other Hindutva-related organizations. What I was wondering is, in your experience of actually traveling through, are the same narratives being repackaged, retold, or are there also new narratives being created, new masala being created? Because between omission of truth to sort of, living in this world of half-truths, to complete blatant lies. There's a huge spectrum of deception that this entire industry is constantly sort of manufacturing. But are there, or is it the same, that the mota baat, the narratives remain the same, and it's just the presentation and the tadka that's different?
I think one of the things that is, sort of very, very powerful about the Hindu right-wing ecosystem right now is this ability to be amorphous, right? As you said, it's shape-shifting in so many different ways. You will not find the same narrative being constantly replayed. You will find newer enemies being created. You will find, incidents being utilized and repackaged to fit that particular agenda. And in my 4 years that I was reporting on this for, I would find everything from a JNU, to Jamia, to Aligarh Muslim University, all of these instances, the CAA protests, for instance, right? Everything somehow fits into the narrative. To give you a small example, and this is very, very recent, and I'm sure a lot of us would relate to it, we are seeing what is happening in the Middle East. We are seeing what is happening in Gaza. Gaza has been repurposed to fit into the narrative so completely, right? There is in these ecosystems, and I keep tracking them on WhatsApp and on Facebook and stuff. I find this one particular graphic constantly doing the rounds, and the graphic says, "India में बहुत सारे Gazas हैं." वहाँ तो एक ही था, India में बहुत सारे हैं, and there is an example of it, and the example is that there is the map of India, which is in saffron, of course. Then there is Pakistan in green, and then there is Bangladesh in green. And connecting Pakistan and Bangladesh through India is this massive strip of land, right? And the caption says, Gandhi had agreed to give this away to Pakistan and Bangladesh during the partition, and this was going to be India's Gaza Strip. Thank God Gandhi was killed. Right? So you see how quickly it has been turned around and repackaged and refashioned to fit the agenda. And I think that is also the strength. That is the reason why they're constantly able to reiterate their core beliefs. They'll take, Afghanistan, when the US withdrawal happened, I had gone to one of the Kavi Sammelans and I talk about it as well. One of the poet that I mentioned, he's, we all, I'm sure you guys all remember the horrific imagery of, Afghans trying to hang on to the aircraft, right? So this is just days after, and I go to the Kavi Sammelan, and he says, "Did you guys see what happened in Afghanistan?" And people say, "Yes, humne dekha." And this is a smaller town. This is Rasulabad, outside of, I'm sure most of us, I didn't know of the place before I went there. He says, "Aapne dekha kya hua?" And people say, "Yes, we saw it." Wahi haal Hinduo ka hoga if you don't wake up now. One day Hindus will have to flee India like that. Very quickly. Right? Very, very malleable. The art is very malleable. It can be used to attack anyone and everyone, anything that fits into the agenda. And that is also what makes it so powerful, but also so insidious.
Namit, you, again, as a stand-up comedian, every day you're using words that can be powerful, even while you said that, your disclaimer that it depends on the gullibility of the audience. What do you think as an artist who is who's creating new work, whether in text or images, theater, film, books, what kind of responsibility should they bear? Because if this is so powerful, especially in the realms of popular culture, what do they have to keep in mind as responsible artists?
The bare minimum one can do is that not play into the existing biases. Is what I tell everyone, that see, you don't have to be political, you don't have to be critical of what's like the wrong things that are happening in the country, because a lot of artists that I work with, they are like, they don't come from, they're extremely middle class, they have to make sure that their art is sustainable. So I'm not saying you take up that responsibility, it's fine, you just focus on making your art sustainable, focus on paying your rent through your art, all right, that which in itself is a very difficult thing in India. But at the least, in India at least, what an artist can do is not conform to the existing biases, not play into them, not propagate them further. Like, You know, and one has to be very careful when they're writing a set. Like a couple of my friends, I'll not give their names, they had 8-10 minute long YouTube videos, all right? And the jokes, there were two jokes, one was about Ghar Wapsi and one joke was about Taj Mahal, which were a part of a larger set. The larger set, which was like way beyond that joke. But what happened was right wing picked up two 30-second clips from there and made them go viral. And those guys accidentally became right wing darlings. And it's a very bad space to be in, because now those both of them are writing jokes which might not offend their or potential audience, because they don't know who might turn up at their shows. You know, it's so for an artist also it's very risky, that just make sure what you're writing, you know, it cannot be taken out of context, because in this country anything can go viral. Anything can go viral. Like you can imagine, so beautiful, so elegant, just looking like a wow went viral. So anything can be taken out of context. So just be careful. Like every single line you write, just make sure it cannot be taken out of context. That I feel as a comic, you should.
You know,
really
I was
make sure of.
actually checking up the social media accounts of all the people that Kunal, you mentioned. Kamal Agneya is everywhere, and I was following him on Facebook. And he's promoting this book like anything. He actually says, my day is made that as a Hindi poet, I have an English book written in my name. So please come and buy the book. So, yeah. One thing that I really found fascinating, and sometimes, actually I used to get a bit irritated with you, Kunal, while reading the book, which is, you humanized these three people that I was ready to hate. You had empathy for their persons while standing at an observational distance for their work. But especially in Kavi's case, I felt there was a deep empathy in what was happening to her as an individual outside of this mess. You actually managed to make the reader feel, oh shit, what has she got herself into, kind of sense. And I was wondering that one of the things that they tell you about hate politics is first dehumanize who you're going to spread the hate about. Take their humanity away. This is also told to kidnappers. Don't call your hostages by name, because that's a way of dehumanizing that person. You did the opposite of that in the book. You took these characters and you actually humanized them. You tried to look beyond their ideology or opportunities that they were taking into their lives, their backgrounds, trying to understand where they came from. How were you able to manage this while at the same time observing and critiquing the way their practice was being used? How was that feasible even?
I think, look, I mean, as a journalist, especially in these times, we're already a very, very polarized society, right? We are walking out of society meetings, we are exiting WhatsApp groups, we're breaking up with old friends from school. I mean, God knows who's in those school groups anymore. So all of that is happening, and I think somewhere the problem with that, Aru, is that we're not able to have a conversation at all, right? Where the lack of conversation means that we also don't know that this exists, right? We don't know that there is this whole genre of pop culture that is existing, because we refuse to look there, right? We refuse to say, I mean, you know, we say, oh, they're communal. I don't need to engage, right? Let them do what they have to do. The problem is, I mean, we can sit in the BIC, we can have all of these conversations, and you know, we can sort of say, oh, this is great book, great solidarity, all of that. But the ideology is the most dominant political ideology of the day. I don't think there is any escaping that. You know, there is no running away from the fact that Hindutva is now extremely popular, right? And it's been made popular through various means, and some of that is popular culture, but it is popular, and I think it is time that we open our eyes to it, and we find ways meaningfully to counter it, to engage with it, and to do that. And I felt, as a journalist, it was my job to bring you their worlds, right? Their motivations behind whatever they were doing. without me necessarily inserting myself in saying they're demons, hate them, right? Or oh, that is bad, or this is communal. I didn't want to do that. I'm presenting their work to you. I'm presenting their thoughts to you. All of it is on record. All of it, we sort of have the audio clips for everything that they've said. So it's all on record. I want to introduce you to that world, and then you make a decision. You sort of see what is happening. But I didn't want to be that guy, and I feel like journalists shouldn't be those people, right? Because we're the bridge in so many ways between these two different worlds that we're living amongst. If we start actively taking sides and refuse to report stories, that is going to be a problem. I mean, in any case, access is a problem. That is a problem, right? That is already a problem. So I felt that the access was much more important than my political biases, right? I mean, none of you are here because you care about Kunal Purohit. You're here because you care about the issue. You care about, what this world is about and what's happening around us. So rather than me inserting myself and feeling important about myself, the story was important, and those worlds and the people were important, and that is what I chose to put forward.
Thanks, Kunal. I'll come towards, before we open up I'm sure the audience will have many questions, so I'd like to keep some time for that. Sort of my last question to both of you. There's a part in the book where you talk about how one of the key ways in which all these three forms work is to strip away from the listener all other identities, but the fact that they are a Hindu person. And this stripping away of identities, all of us inhabit multiple identities, right? But you're made to feel you're nothing but a Hindu person. And this stripping away of all other identities makes you vulnerable, almost like a sponge to soak in then what is given to you. Sometimes I have felt, while wondering about, over the last 10, 15 years, how does one deal? How does one create counter-narratives? Where will these counter-narratives come from? And how can they be made compelling enough that perhaps this stripping away is one little loophole, almost like an Achilles heel, from which one could enter and recreate those, what has been stripped off, redress those and say, you're not just a Hindu, but you are also X, Y, Z. That's been my sense of where counter-narratives can come from. I wanted to ask the two of you again, where do you see, Namit? Do you see any counter-narratives coming? And if so, where could they come from? Could they be as compelling as this? And if yes, why? If not, what could be some of the challenges?
So see, the biggest example of a counter narrative is in the states of the South. If you notice, most of the regions in which this kind of thing propagates really fast and where people are like, oh, my core identity is only that I'm a Hindu, is that these places have lost their essence of local culture. If you go in UP, Aligarh used to be a hotbed of Urdu literature. Now most kids don't even know how to read and write Urdu. They completely have forgot that part of their history. And slowly these guys are doing it, very smartly. They're changing names of cities. Allahabad is now Prayagraj. So that legacy, that history that people could actually hold on to, which was very tangible, which was a part of their identity, they are taking that away, and that leaves what? Just them being a Hindu. One of the reasons why, in Tamil Nadu or in Kerala, this kind of politics is finding it really hard to penetrate into is because the regional identity is very strong. And that is also a counter-narrative. A Tamilian is not just a Hindu, he's also a Tamilian. A Keralite is not just a Hindu, he's also a Keralite. There's so much of, solid regional arts, regional history, regional legacy. So that is one very, very effective counter-narrative, that you're not just a Hindu, man, you're way more than that. You're an Avdi, you're a Bundelkhandi, you're a Purvanchali, you're someone from Braj. But no one speaks that anymore. In fact, in my family, we have been completely stripped out of it. Like, my mother tongue is supposed to be Braj, which is the language of Aligarh, Mathura and Agra, which goes like, "Abhe ka chal raha hai," But not even my family members speak that, because we have been sent to, English schools and all of that, and our interaction with the outside world has been completely stopped. We are just being indoctrinated. Like one thing that, he pointed out really beautifully was that how can you like how can you dehumanize people you don't agree with? I will end up dehumanizing my own family because I don't agree with them. And that's the case with most of the kids who come from my area. Like, from UP and Bihar, our families are hardcore. You look at our WhatsApp group, your eyes will burn. You're like, what is this? So the counter narrative is this, that, there are more aspects to this country than just religion. We have to focus on that. We have to highlight those, and those can be a very effective counter narrative, is what I feel.
Look, I mean, I'm trying to be hopeful here. It's not easy, but there is definitely, I mean, there is the need for a counter narrative. I think all of us agree. The problem is, I don't think we're able to understand the wide expanse of the narratives that they're setting, right? For instance, the demand for a caste census. And a lot of people thought this is going to be the magic bullet, and this is going to be what will, get us to sort of polarize people and wean them away. But there are better alternatives. I mean, the fallacy with all of this is the lack of understanding that we have about how the Hindu right-wing ecosystem even works. The RSS, for instance, does a lot of work, and there's amazing literature on this as well that other scholars have pointed to, which is about how they go into smaller caste groups and subcaste groups, right? So they're simultaneously working towards reiterating those caste identities at that level, while still trying to, sort of create this umbrella Hindu identity through which they can all be. Yeah, tribal, absolutely. Right, so I think what we're not able to grasp is just the amount of work that has gone into creating these narratives. And for such a long time. It's not overnight. It's not since 2014. They've been doing this for a very, very long time now. I mean, we're now waking up to so much of what they're doing. But I think it's very fairly well entrenched for us to, wake up and say, okay, now let's ask for a caste census. That doesn't work. Having said that, there are still, I believe, enough and more people who are trying to, do what they have to do. I mean, there are amazing people in the room that I can see who are doing amazing work, trying to create these counter narratives, trying to, be it journalism, be it activism. There are so many people here in this room, I know, who are trying to do that. So I think the idea somewhere is that we all also support each other. I mean, people who believe in a certain world view of things need to also step up and sort of perform those duties. And I see that happening in that case a lot. And I'll give you a small example of this because this is, again, very recent. And I was just coming here and I was on the phone with my publisher. Last night, Shashi Tharoor tweeted about the book. And since then, the Hindu right wing has sort of upped its ante and they've gone on to Amazon, and the book rating has dropped from a 5 to a 2.3. I mean, it was, sort of they've all said, oh, okay, so this is the book to attack. But what it does tell me is that there is that great sense of solidarity, right? I mean, they're hating on me, but they're united in hating on me. I don't know if there is enough solidarity here. I mean, I don't know how many of us, for instance, because I'm a journalist, I'm going to say this, I don't know how many of us support independent media newsrooms, for instance, right? We don't. I mean, we're okay with not doing any of this. We're okay to not go beyond our little worlds that we inhabit and sort of step up and say, okay, I'm going to do this. And I think that is where the counter narratives will also start coming. I think it has to start from all of us.
Thanks, Kunal. It's very important, this last bit that you talked about, the solidarities, because one of the probably problems that we've always had is that we have been so divided in love and the other side has been so united in hate. And we find the simplest reason, I used to joke about this in West Bengal, saying, look at the other side, they are like even the lowest common denominator, they're coming together, and here we are discussing, I mean, left groups are breaking up, comparing the size of Marx's beard or something like that, and you'll have 15 different left groups having different very serious opinions about it. All in jest, but it's come back to bite us now, right? Because we, even with very little differences, we tend to split and individualize, then come together, and that's a key problem. let's open this up. I'm sure many of you have questions. And yeah.
Hi. My question is fairly simple, but is there any role at all for censorship? Because there is a huge amount of censorship that is going on in this country. People are censoring themselves, or you're being censored by whichever institution you're in. You're not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to talk about many things, including love jihad. But how come this whole area that you are talking about completely escapes any discussion on censorship, regulation, self-regulation, or whatever?
Just one quick thing. Before you mention your question, just tell us who it's for Namit or for Kunal or for both of them. That'll be easy for them. Kunal.
So, Mohan, that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because a lot of this work, of course, the reason why I even wrote this book is because this work is not just online, but they're going to smaller towns, they're going to villages, they're going to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. But a lot of the work is also online, right? So there is the offline persona, they're doing concerts, they're doing Kavi Sammelans, they're selling books as far as, in the UK, for instance, and I have family which sort of patronizes some of them, and I write about this in the book as well. But there are all of those offline connections, but there's a lot of the work that is happening online, and then happening on YouTube, happening on Facebook, as you mentioned, Aru. They all have very vibrant online personas. Who's going to censor them, right? And if there is a censor that comes in, what is the guarantee that it's not going to get to the rest of us? We're already seeing signs, right? We're seeing the broadcast bill at this point. We're seeing how the government is hand-picking influencers on YouTube, giving them government contracts to do, videos and things like that. So we're already seeing that the government is eyeing that online space. But this aspect of censorship, again, becomes tricky to discuss. Who regulates and how? One thing that the book doesn't directly mention, but definitely wants to sort of appeal to, is this idea of social media platforms absolutely getting a free pass, right? All of these guys are creators who have been incentivized, especially by YouTube, because YouTube pays them, right? They're paid by YouTube. It's an incentive for them to continuously make all of this content. And I mentioned some of the data around the money that they're also earning. So I think there's that conversation that we need to have about how social media platforms are allowing all of this to happen and incentivizing it commercially as well. I don't know if censorship is the right sort of way to approach it, but definitely regulation by platforms and us demanding more of the platforms that we're on, I think is definitely a start.
Hi, thanks, sorry. Thanks, Kunal. Lovely to see you. So this question is for all three of you, and it's connected to the question that this gentleman asked about censorship. So I'm an artist, and I've been thinking about this for quite a while. First, I want to say, Kunal, thank you so much for pulling me out of the echo chamber to listen, to read to these people. And Arundhati, absolutely. Kavi Singh she was really humanized to me. I felt something for her as a woman being played by all these forces. So here's my question, Arundhati. You asked about, this art that is propaganda art, that is liberal art. And Brahm Prakash says in a fantastic book saying words are being curtailed by authoritarian regimes. And I have a Chinese artist friend who says, but words are unreliable. Because in China, they have high levels of censorship. So my question is to all three of you as journalists, as artists, how do we counter censorship? How do we as artists, if I as an artist do not want an FIR, I don't want to wear the badge of FIR, how do I make art that slips through all of this? Is there a way, or are we doomed? I do have to stand and say what I stand for, or can there be different ways of negotiating terms of subterfuge? Because I know in China they do that. In Iran they were doing that. So what would you say? What do we do? Where are we at? What can I do and not do as an artist?
Just to quickly say, Anuja is like, you've mentioned it, but I was going to give you the example of Iranian cinema, actually. And which for me was a great strategy of subterfuge. They used to make children's films. I mean, those films we saw, they were funded under children's films. I'll actually let the two of you
I'll
respond
let
to
the man with the FIR first.
The first way out of like making sure that you don't get an FIR is go through the IPC properly. Read every section, figure it out, because yeah, there are loopholes. Okay, it is very clear. It is very clear, like the section 295A, which was put on me. Okay, I had violated it thoroughly. So no two ways there. But yeah, see, the thing is that most of these sections are archaic. They have no place in the modern constitution, but they are still there. So they are the law. So you have to either go around them or, just follow them to the T. But the only way to avoid it is like just go through it properly, and you will find loopholes that don't take certain names. Go for an indirect narrative. Do not refer to the individual or the fictional individual directly. Refer to them indirectly. And that way you avoid, because now I still do jokes at my club, and I still, a lot of it is very controversial, but I don't take any names directly now. Come up with stuff. If you would have noticed it in movies, they go for fictional cities, even though we all know while watching the movie which city is he talking about. But so I think that's a very solid way to go around it.
I mean, hindsight is 2020, right, Namit? So, look, I don't know, Anu. I mean, I don't know how to answer that as a journalist, because, I mean, how do, what is the level of... Yeah, you don't, right? So, but, I mean, subversion, absolutely. At the risk of a fresh FIR. And I think it is irrespective of the establishment that we fight. I think we've got to find smarter ways to tell the story that we have to tell. We are, for instance, and I do documentaries and podcasts, and that space is very, very difficult to now penetrate with stories like these, right? So do you stop telling stories? You don't. But you find ways to, I don't know, make it sexy, for instance, right? Or to try and sort of find different ways to tell the story. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think the answer is also to collectivize, right? Where are our solidarity groups? Where are the networks that can come together and say, okay, how about this? How about we treat a topic like love jihad, for instance? Can we do it a different way? Can we tell the story in a way that isn't necessarily seen as an attack on the establishment, but yet tells us the absurdities of what is happening? So, and this is where the power of collectivization also comes, right? I mean, as creators and as artists alone, it's very, very lonely. It's very isolating, and I'm sure Namit has his fair share of facing the FIR, sort of fighting it. Maybe if he had I don't know, 20, 30 other comics with him, saying, okay, let's try and brainstorm a bit. Let's try and tell these jokes, but in ways that, after reading the IPC, in ways that don't sort of openly flout it. And I think that is where the answer is. Subversion is the answer. We can't stop telling the stories.
In fact, just reminded me that a lot of poets, what we often do is, two things have really inspired me. One is that the various ways in which the queer world told its stories for the longest time. And the other way is the way Bhakti talks about through metaphors. So both the Bhakti movement that uses hugely metaphoric language to allegories, metaphors, to tell you a story which there's enough deniability in actual facts. So as artists, you can always work with the fantastical. I found fantasy another great way of doing it. We have people in this room who've also worked within these kind of forms. But the queer world really, because for the longest time, those stories could not be told, but they were, and through different ways and means. As an example, Bangla as a language does not have a he or a she. If you write a whole short story in Bangla about our Prime Minister, and you just say she, you could easily say that was a story about a woman, because it's not evident either in your pronouns or in your verbs. So use of language, just strategies, I guess.
Also, sorry, quickly, just use your privilege better. Right? I can't emphasize this enough. If you're in positions of privilege and power where you can commission stuff, for instance, or you can fund you can support, do that, right? Don't self-censor in those positions, because when you in those positions self-censor, there's an entire, sort of chain of artists, of creators, of people of all kinds who want to tell those stories, who will just be dreading the fact that, okay, this guy in positions of power is self-censoring, there's no chance I'm going to be able to tell the story. So do not self-censor, and I see that increasingly with different platforms. They'll say, "Arey, but sarkar naraz ho jayegi." I said, but sarkar ko bolne do, naraz hongi to. Why are you speaking for them at this point, right? So if you're in positions of power, if you're in positions of privilege, use that privilege and do not self-censor. Self-censor. I can't stress this enough.
See, that is the one thing that's prevalent pretty much in my field as well. If the top comics of the country, people who are extremely viral, were talking about politics, were talking about stuff more than their college life, their school life, they were actually addressing issues, it will give courage to the other comics who are, currently at the local level to also talk about this. They are seeing that they are self-censoring so much. So it has become kind of like a way of life now for comics. Because this is how you sustain in this industry. So if people who are like at the top of their game right now with the max amount of followers, with the max amount of audiences, they have to take the charge. Like he said, that they have to use their current privilege to take the charge and then, put that, like give courage to the people who are still making their way through the industry.
Okay, so Kunal, congratulations on the book. I'm very excited to go down this rabbit hole. I actually very regularly go and look for new Hindutva pop. It's quite the fascinating rabbit hole. My question for you is there a limit to the empathy that one can lay upon or look at people who seem to be incapable of looking at others with empathy and who are incapable of humanizing the other? What are the limits to that empathy? That's one. And another comment that I had was, I've been wondering about Anuja's question as well, that how do we counter some of this? And I wonder if Namit wants to weigh in on this, if one of the ways is also to do the myth making that they do so well. They make these myths so beautifully, and they give it a very compelling spin that is rooted in hurt, pride, and fragility. So where do our counter myths, what can they be located in, is a question I often ask myself. I'm floundering as an artist. I'm floundering to answer that question, but I am tackling it, and I'm wondering, as a stand-up, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, thank you for this intervention, and thank you for a wonderful discussion. What I wanted to make a brief comment on was about the whole thing about, where does the counter come from? That's a very important thing for me. And I have found in my work as a writer, and I have traveled with the Kanvariyas, just like you have with the, so I've written about actually I see this entire regime and all that they represent majorly attacking our belief, belief itself. I'm just saying belief itself, not belief in anything, but belief itself. Because everything we really believed in is under attack. So it's difficult now to even go to temples. I consider Hindutva a very big hurdle in being a believing Hindu. So it starts from there. Similarly, they've been able to construct narratives which have even destroyed our belief in goodness, in humanity, in decency, in everything. And now they've come to a stage when they're attacking our belief in elections. Because we see a whole series of events leading up to elections where people are literally spitting on them, and we see their body language at rallies looking so defeated, and then we see the exit poll and we see the numbers. And it's difficult to believe anymore in the electoral process also. So what happens is that when there's such a strong attack on beliefs, I want to know what you think could be a counter. I believe that the counter should be that we reiterate our beliefs once more. If we are against this, then what is it that we still believe in? If we believe in goodness, if we believe in, and that's why I think to some extent that whole thing of, mohabbat ki dukaan kholna nafrat ki time mein was a good thing, because at least it said we stand for something. So we also need to say it, it's one thing to be survival oriented and say, ki, let's use allegory, let's be less direct, but we also need to be a lot more direct in forcing out there what we believe in. That's really gone. That's why I think sometimes our wishy-washiness makes us really, get defeated. Let me know. This is actually for anyone to answer.
Namit, you want to take the first?
So, see, the major difference is again in the audience that we are playing to. One thing that we need to understand is that the left is less gullible, the left is more educated, and for the left to get aligned to anything, they require a lot of information. It is never going to be a quick thing. Like, see, now with this singer, I keep forgetting, Kavi Singh. So now imagine this. She came up with the song in one day, and that song became a viral sensation. How much of research she could have done in one day? But in one day, she was able to come up with a song which resonated with everyone because it was so simple. So I think maybe one thing that we have to, if, in order to build a narrative, in order to get more people to our side, maybe one thing that we'll have to do is be more accessible. Maybe talk in a language that more people understand, because, like this discussion we're having right now, okay? None of my friends in Aligarh will understand this. Like, kya Angrezi mein bak kar raha hai be? They'll not get it. But Kavi Singh, they listen to her. So I think if you have to build a counter narrative, you have to get closer to the grassroots of this country, because that is where the real India is. India, the elections are not won in Bangalore or Chennai or Hyderabad or Bombay. The elections are won in Bareilly, Raebareli, Jhansi, Morena. So, and in order to make those people understand what you're saying, you have to speak their language.
To your question about empathy, look, I think empathy at a human level, yes, but it has its limits, right? There is no empathy for hate speech, for instance. There is no empathy for dehumanizing someone on the basis of their faith, their religion, their caste, and so on. So even in the case of these characters, the empathy that we spoke about is possibly for their human condition. It's not at all, and I hope that you see this when you read it, but it's not at all for the art that they're creating. And they're two very different things, because I think at some point we also need to understand that they're not demons, right? And I say they as the right wing, and this being the left wing, for instance. They're not demons. The people who you're fighting against are not extraterrestrial creatures. They are people like us. They have similar dreams, similar aspirations, similar fears sometimes. Of course, just the politics is very, very different. And I think that human condition is still necessary for us to be able to connect with each other at that level, and then counter the art and the craft in that sphere. So the empathy can never be for the work and for what they're propagating. The empathy can be for the people and the foot soldiers in some ways of the larger movement. And sort of that is what the book is also hoping to establish. About your question, Chada, I think you answered it. You sort of, the idea is to continue believing. The idea is to not stop believing. And I keep saying this. I mean, as journalists, I think we're some of the most optimistic people. At least I am, because the day journalists stop being optimistic, we lose our character. Then we're just cynical souls writing about things that are never going to change. And at least I hope, and at least I hope that the things that I'm writing will change. I hope that things take a new direction. So essentially, journalism does teach you to be hopeful and sort of does push you to have hope. And I would say the same for you. I hope that we continue believing, and I hope that we continue trying to find ways, trying to find solutions to it. Solutions will not come out of despair. They will come out of the belief that I love saying, "Lambi hai gam ki sham, magar sham hi to hai." So I hope we continue believing in that.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for writing this and thank you for being here. So there's many examples of these things from around the world, right? You have things that have, in terms of the grassroots population, completely going against part of itself, if you will, right? The Jews in Germany, and there's so many other such examples. And in many of these countries, whether it's Germany, Iran, Russia, China, they did not manage to overthrow the force, right? Germany, foreigners came and saved it, thankfully. But beyond Germany, China and Iran and Russia continue to struggle. They may produce magnificent art, but the art has not changed their oppressive regimes in this many years. So one of the scariest things is that the longer you let this, the more it pervades and the harder it becomes to change. But I think what India has that many other countries may or may not have is while many countries like China, large countries, are extremely diverse, India genuinely has a diversity of languages to the point even today that in most parts of the country that are 300 kilometers away, we can't understand each other unless we resort to a language that is foreign to at least one of us, right? As someone from the south, Hindi is a foreign language to me. I speak it fine, but I'm saying it's not native to this part. So in some sense, that myth making doesn't need to be some artificial thing, so long as it's drawn from local traditions that are actually quite significantly different every few hundred kilometers, right? And it's almost that the homogeneous Hindutva tradition and the identity of me as the singular identity, not just of being a Hindu, but of being a national identity that strips away all the other identities of your gender, of your caste, of your region, of your language, of your, even the religion in a sense. It's just, Hinduism is too diverse to be one Hinduism, right? I mean, the vegetarians of the north are appalled at what happens in Deepavali here in many parts of the country, right? And yet it's the most natural thing to slaughter creatures during festivals. So in some ways, the myth making, if we could go back to sponsoring just local myths, there is already local artists. There's already local artists. There's already local gods. There's already local goddesses. There's already local, everything you can think of, from cuisine to, and all of this is already anti the homogenizing narrative that's attempting to be peddled. It's just that I think we are too caught up in the BICs of the world and not sponsoring, regional stuff, sub-regional stuff enough. It's just a comment I want.
Hello. Hi, great talk, loved that. So this was just an idea that came to my head while I was listening to you. So a question that I wanted to ask was, why is it that this hate, sells so much? Is it because, it caters to our eternal radical need for an enemy? We need to always have an enemy, like moving from the colonizers, now we have the Hindu Muslims, right? It just sounds like, on which side of the hate are you there? That might sound very reductionist, but on which side of the hate? So is this hate really that inevitable? Because that sounds very hopeless, and I don't want to dwell on that.
See, hate sells because people who are hating right now, they are people who feel they have been ignored for a very long amount of time. I'm just talking about in Indian context. See, what you have asked is it's a philosophical question. But I'm going to keep it within the context of the discussion that we're having today. So currently, that kind of hate is selling for two reasons. First, the vacuum was there. There is a bunch of people, who have felt that, our voice has been ignored for really long. We have been ignored for really long. And second is, they are selling it really well. They are very smart. They are playing the algorithm game. They are playing the marketing game to the T. Like again, I'll come back to Kavi Singh. She released the song a day after. That's how internet marketing works. You have to hit when the iron is hot. She released the song well within the time when the news was fresh in people's head. That song wouldn't have been a viral sensation had she released it after, like, say, a week. You know, she released it a day after. That's why it blew up. Because people right now don't care about whether it's well-researched or well-informed or anything. Those days are long gone. As of now, people have like very short attention spans. And these people are playing that game really well. So why is hate selling? Is because they're very good at it. Yeah.
Just one quick comment. I think hate also offers explanations, right? It's an explanation to what you've possibly gone through in your life. You know, if you don't get jobs, I'll make you hate a migrant. And then that's an explanation, right? I'm not getting a job because migrants are coming here, right? If something is not going well, I will try and find an enemy who you can then blame. And then that becomes your explanation. Similarly, in the book, I've sort of, very deliberately gone into their early childhoods and their early lives as well. All of the three characters, just to understand, if I can call it that, the point of radicalization, right? I wanted to understand why they chose the ideology they did. And you'll see this in the book if you read it. For them, the ideology was an explanation for what they were going through. Kamal, for instance, he was betrayed, his father was betrayed by his best friend who was a Muslim, right? And Kamal couldn't make head or tail of it. He said, here are these guys, Muslims, we used to love them, they used to love us. They would come home, we would go to their house, I would touch his feet, everything was fine. And then one day he turns against us and refuses to give up the property that we had leased to them. And here comes the Hindu right-wing ideology, and he sort of gets exposed to it a few years later, which says all Muslims are like this, right? This is what they'll do to you. They will betray your trust. And he suddenly finds an explanation. He says, oh, okay, so it's not just them. It's not those guys who were bad. It is the religion who was bad, and now it makes sense to me. And this has happened multiple times with all of the three characters, where they've sought explanations for their personal traumas, for their personal struggles in the ideology, and got those explanations. So I think that is also the reason why we resonate so much with some of the hate that sort of comes towards us.
Just to add to that, completely agree with both of you. Kunal specifically saying that hate becomes a misdirection from the real thing also. That, like the easy explanation that you said. But I've also sometimes I feel that, many years ago somebody very wise told me, if you want to make money in the stock market, the two things you have to figure out is fear and greed. These are the two things that drive people. I found out later in life that whether you look at office politics, whether you look at politics of the nation or personal relationships, if you understand fear and greed, it makes it so much simpler to understand life and people. Now, I think fear and greed are also very potent, infectious, easy and lazy strategies to gain people to your side. Love is hard. Hate is easy. I think love is hard because it places somebody else before you. That's a harder thing to do, and that's also it takes much more time to make somebody love something than to make somebody fear or hate something. So maybe that's why.
Okay, so in this left versus right, Hindu versus Muslim, pro-BJP versus pro-Congress, is there any space left for center people who just want to love and hates nothing? Is there any space left for us?
Okay, I'll keep it quick here. Kunal, one correction. I think some of us are here also because we appreciate your work, not just the issue. And the question itself is, so, just splitting this into, so you made the point that Hindutva is popular, right? And we tend to rationalize it to ourselves, looking at vote share numbers and what have you. But just splitting this, from your broader reportage as well, if you look at it just from the from the creation perspective and the distribution perspective, where do you think it's possible for us to draw the line between, at the creation stage, is it identity, or is it, just to your point, is it greed, is it just opportunism, right? And from the distribution perspective, to what extent is it popularity versus inorganic distribution that we can have on social media platforms and other mediums?
Hi, Kunal, Amit. Like many of us believe, or maybe perhaps naively, at least I do, that even at the height of 2019, the secondary election, the vote percentage of the ruling dispensation is 36-37%, which can be read as 63% don't agree with them, right? That's one positive way of looking at it for those of us looking for it. What I wanted to know is how much of the Hindutva obsession is really there versus there's a perception that it's growing. Because you mentioned a very important point that the moment Shashi Tharoor tweeted your stuff, suddenly your rating dropped. Whole bunch of people got into action and did something, right? I'm pretty sure none of them know anything about your book or even bothered to read the author's name or anything like that. They've got a clear instruction, do this. So therefore, my question is, how much of it is that farm, employment, IT cell type activity versus actually people believing this kind of nonsense, and that is growing or not? My belief, it comes from the earlier point I made, that a lot of people actually don't agree with it. But we are told that a lot of people are agreeing with it, so therefore you're also worried, and maybe you should also look at that way. I would like you to comment on the role of the organized social media mafia or IT cell, whatever you want to call that, in your experience.
Sir, coming to your question. See, the thing is that in this scenario, eventually you'll have to pick sides. There is no way out. Because for the hardcore Hindutva wing that, we have in this book also, which has been captured, for them, if you're a Hindu and if you're not on their side, you're their enemy any which ways. Like, even if you want to remain at the center, you are their enemy, because they are like कि हिंदुओं का आज इतना बुरा हाल ही इसलिए कि हिंदू शांत रहते हैं. So according to them, even if you are not doing anything, even if you just want to stay in the center and just love everyone, you are the villain for them. So this scenario, I mean, that ship has sailed. Now you gotta pick sides. Yeah. Over to you, Kunal.
Real minority is the kind of people. We are the real minority now.
So I'll take both of the questions together about the reach, the perceived reach, the popularity. Look, I mean, there's no denying that there is an organized army, and of course we've all seen, either we've suffered at the hands or we've seen and witnessed how organized and how systematic they can be in bringing down voices, attacking, dissent and all of that. So there is that. But the truth of the matter is also that a lot of what they're saying is resonating with substantial parts of the country, especially in the states that I've traveled to. Right? And the book is based out of 7 different states, mostly in North and Central India. So there is that popularity that they see. I mean, the people who are turning up for concerts or laughing at some of this poetry, they're not IT cell members. They're not Bajrang. I mean, I've seen families, gaon ke families. They're all coming. They're enjoying it. Yes, one can argue that they may not necessarily agree with it, but they're patronizing the art till however far it can go. There's a larger point here that I definitely do want to make, which is that, I think in some of these worlds and the ecosystem that I've seen, Hindutva is not necessarily political power. That is not the final aim of the larger Hindu right-wing ecosystem. A lot of them believe that this is a cultural war that they're fighting, right? It doesn't necessarily have to translate into a victory for the BJP in, say, a UP or an MP. Of course, if it does, it's great. But I don't necessarily believe that Hindutva alone gives them victory. And I mean, I've gone to villages where I've met people, who've seen substantial sort of reduction in their quality of lives. and yet they vote for the dispensation because they say, हमको नहीं मिला लेकिन हमारे बगल में एक cylinder आ गया. So now the next time I'll get a cylinder, right? And that is also, I mean, so welfareism is, for instance, one ploy. And which is why I keep saying that it's a fallacy to think that Hindutva is the only thing that is getting votes. What Hindutva does is this, it's constantly playing this tune in the background, right? While you do everything else. I keep telling people, I said, you know, the current BJP, RSS, you know, the Hindu right wing, is like a bouquet of flowers that, you know, sort of, they hold a bouquet of flowers and they go to voters. They say, what do you want? You want Vikas? Okay, here's a metro. Highway ban raha hai. WhatsApp videos aa jayenge aapko. What else do you want? Do you want defense? ठीक है, ये देखो, है ना? ये हो गया, Pakistan में surgical strike हो गई. What else do you want? So then one of the options is Hindutva, yes. But that's not the only option. You know, there are various narratives that they're constantly setting, and some of these people are helping them set these various narratives at all times. So it's a fallacy to think that it is only Hindutva that is giving them, you know, the popularity. Having said that, Hindutva is constantly playing in the background. So I don't know if necessarily it results in victories, but there is a larger cultural transformation that we're seeing in so many of these parts, where the way you perceive things, the way you look at things, for instance, history, right? I've mentioned in the book, you know, this constant attempt at re-looking at the legacy of figures like Gandhi, Nehru. There's a constant sort of orchestrated campaign that is on in this ecosystem about that. And then that seeps into people. So the idea is not that, you know, you hate Gandhi for what he did 75 years ago and go and vote for the BJP. But the idea is you change the way you look at some of this stuff. And that for me is very dangerous. Because it's reinventing history, it's recasting historical events in a new light. I think political power is what we're all sort of focused on, but there are so many of these sort of subliminal narratives that we're not able to understand and not able to counter. And I think that is somewhere, you know, that we also need to pay attention to if we really want to build stronger counter narratives.
Thank you so much, Namit, Kunal. And thanks the audience for your engaged participation, for all the questions. The book is available outside. Please pick up the book. Now you will sign them. Yes.